All right. Good evening, class. Um, this is going to be the first theory upload on my channel of divine masculine theory. Right now, it's probably divine masculine principle, but it's really divine masculine theory. And basically, what I want to make this channel about is basically me theorizing certain truths about the universe, masculinity, and men's relation to women, and basically awakening the divine masculine principle on the earth. And basically, what that means to me is what is the actual spiritual way to develop yourself as a man. Um, this has nothing to do with religion or anything. It's just what it is. Okay, so excuse the bad camera, excuse the glare. I don't really have any sort of better lighting. I use LED strips, as you can see, and that glare is from the LED strip. But hopefully, whenever I move into my new apartment and I get better lighting, you'll be able to see really clearly this board. But basically, I basically wrote this down and just theorized something about a lot of things, about resistance, about desires, and it has a lot to do with the emotional frequency chart, right? So I'm going to show you a picture of an emotional frequency chart, what it looks like. Hopefully you can see it. Here we go. All right, so this is an emotional frequency chart. You can't see it. So what this emotional frequency chart is, it's a visual indicator of what emotions can put you on a higher vibration. And basically what a higher vibration, what I theorize is, my theory behind being on a higher vibration is, it's you essentially getting closer to God, right? And, to my understanding is that we are all inside of God, and God is inside all of us. Hence, God's omniscience, and not omniscience, omnipresence, right? God is omnipresent. Not only is God within all of us, but we are also all of us inside of God, right? And I don't want to get too much into that topic, but one of the biggest things that I want to start off this video with saying is that human beings, right, we are inherently lazy and we want things easy. And essentially what this video is about is it's the biggest plague, I think, to the modern man is their ability to push past resistance, right? So, okay, what is resistance? Resistance is pretty much the negative thoughts, your lack of willingness to push past an obstacle, whether physical or mental, which I would argue mental resistance is harder than physical resistance. As you can see, I have mastered physical resistance really well to reach your goals. Okay, so how do I start this? Well, first off, start with acknowledging the core, right? The core of a human being is they're lazy and we want things to be easy, right? That's like the core of resistance. And the reason why I drew this line is because I don't believe resistance is a gradual path. I believe it is a threshold, okay? And I'm gonna have some vulgar analogies on this channel, so if you're young and you're watching this, you may want to click off. But a way to understand this from perspective, you can think about it as a membrane, right? And you can think about this during sex. So, as a man, men have been historically represented as a phallus, right? Which is, a dick, right? A penis. And when you think about the role of, the phallus, it's penetration. It's penetration to, for the purpose of giving life. But in order to give life, you have to penetrate, right? And then when you think about a woman's anatomy, they have something basic. They have a membrane, right? It's called, like a hymen, and It's essentially a membrane you have to push past in order to reach the goal of producing a child. So why did I bring that analogy up? It's because this fundamental um, act, right? It's an act of you essentially pushing past a resistance to bring about a positive result um, that is brought about through pain. Okay. So the reason I believe resistance is a membrane just like that is because, you don't really necessarily gradually overload resistance. You don't gradually overload. I know, like in weight training and bodybuilding, you overload resistance, but to get stronger over time. But when you think of it like this, resistance isn't something that you face and then you dip your toe in it. You simply just make the decision to push past it. You ready? You just make the decision to push past it, right? So when you look at this model, what is it that I exactly drew out? I'm gonna have a hard time explaining this. Everything below your line of resistance, any sort of emotion that basically submits to resistance, is things that you would find would come out of basically the lower half end of the emotional frequency chart. So if you were to look up an emotional frequency chart right now, you would see below the lower half of the emotional frequency chart would actually be courage, right? So below courage, you have pride, anger, desire, fear, grief, apathy, guilt, and shame. Any sort of action done out of these emotions will naturally result in you being unable to push past resistance. In the middle of this emotional frequency chart, you have courage and neutrality. Courage and neutrality won't necessarily result in you not being able to push past resistance, but it will not result in you pushing past in resistance either. It will basically have you on the teeter-totter, right? You have courage. It's the start of you getting ready to push past resistance, to push past an obstacle, but it doesn't actually get the job done. If you have neutrality, it doesn't necessarily help you push past resistance, but it keeps you from falling to resistance. The thing that actually begins, right, the higher frequencies, the higher emotions is acceptance, reason, love, joy, peace, and enlightenment. Enlightenment being pretty much the highest frequency. So with this being said, the most essential emotion to pushing past resistance, it actually starts with willingness. It actually starts with willingness to push past resistance. But I'm saying this to show you that my initial claim is that, okay, resistance isn't something that's just like gradually overloaded, something that you just either push past or you don't. You cannot be neutral with resistance. You cannot be neutral with resistance. You cannot push past the membrane with a limp gummy worm, right? You cannot. You will not, right? So with that being said, this is the theory, this is the evidence that I'm using to support my claim, with the fact that resistance is not just a gradual slope that you use to casually, with limp dick energy, right, to push past. It's something you either choose to do, that you're either willing to do or not, right? And then that leads to acceptance. You accept your suffering, right? Like how Christ accepted his suffering on the cross. His acceptance and his willingness to die for the sins of humanity led to Christ pushing past the resistance of pushing past humanity. So you can almost look at the emotional frequency chart and determine, right, in the middle, which emotions lead to pushing past resistance. And it starts with acceptance and willingness, right? And then the enlightened person, right, enlightenment is even higher than love, right? Because enlightenment is the reality of love. Um, that person doesn't even sense resistance. Resistance is just like, it's like it becomes second nature to this person, and this person no longer actually fears it, right? So what exactly else did I draw here? What exactly did I make? We all have our own version of hell. So below this resistance, I drew an arrow, and we all have our own version of hell. I believe that hell is actually within our own imagination and within all of us individually, right? If we were to die and go to hell, the hell that you would experience would actually more than likely be different than the hell that I experience. But I honestly theorize, right? I theorize that hell, in and of itself, the pain of hell, it being our own subjective, own individual, different experience, would be like that of being burned alive in sulfur and fire, right? Emotionally. Now, I'm not going to speak too much on that because I haven't really refined this theory too much. But below these resistances, the acts, right, the wavelengths that gets transferred by being someone who does not push past resistance ultimately lead you to your own version of hell. So how does one get to hell? Well, they don't receive forgiveness. They don't receive forgiveness of their sins, right? What that means is you're not able to forgive yourself. You commit acts because you fall to resistance that you're not able to forgive yourself for. And that puts you in a lower vibration, because then it leads to pride, anger, desire, fear, grief, apathy, guilt, and then ultimately shame. Shame being pretty much the worst emotion that anyone could ever feel. It's the lowest vibrational. So because, the dogma of your resistance, the dogma, I believe, of pretty much every man's resistance, is that human beings, we are lazy and we want things to be easy. That's just the truth. That's just the truth, right? Progress was never really built on the desire to innovate. It was really built on the desire to put control on other people and slavery. I'm not going to get into that. But with this being said, when I analyze myself, I see me falling to resistance leads me to have reap certain consequences. For me, that is weakness, both physical and spiritual, uh, casual sex, and the inability to lead as a man. These are just the things, me personally, that that weaken me as a man, right? I am an attractive man, and I am able to have sex fairly easily. Overindulgence in it with people that I don't love actually weakens me as a person, right? But okay, well then, how does one define that these things are negative or not? Well, it all pretty much is subjective to the goal that you have. The goal that I have of pushing past resistance is to lead, right? Is to lead other men. It's for my other YouTube channels. It's for me to just be a better leader. Okay, so the best case scenario of me pushing past resistance, the goal of it is to me be a better leader, right? And the antithesis of it is to me to be a poor leader and someone who falls into sex and weakness. Okay, and you can understand this because when is it that you fap? Right? When is it that you do fall into casual sex or smoking weed or doing things that you don't do, that you know you shouldn't do? It's when you are below the threshold of resistance, because you're being influenced and possessed by the lower half of the low vibrational emotions, which is neutrality, pride, anger, desire, fear, grief, apathy, guilt, and shame. Okay, courage. Courage, I believe, is the beginning of you actually starting to see positivity, to actually start to see positivity as the start of the good. I think having pride and lower pride, I think, is like the best negative emotion that you could experience, right? And negative doesn't necessarily mean it makes you feel bad. It simply means that it's putting you in a lower vibration, leading you to low vibrational behaviors that are basically getting you closer to your hell and getting you further away from your God, right? The God within each of us and the God that us ourselves as human beings are dwelling in. Okay, so with that being said, I thought about this. This is the interesting part. This is when this video gets, hopefully is getting interesting to you right now. Why do we actually want to break past resistance? Why? Well, it's because, oh, I want to lead. Why? Why did you click on this video? Did you think about that? Like, why did you even click on this video? Why do you want to improve yourself? I do believe for most people, it's for money and more views. Like for me, I want to get more views on YouTube, right? This is channel that you're watching right now. This is like just a passion project. I want to get more views on YouTube. Okay, I want to get more views on YouTube. I want to lead people better. I want to make more money. But this is the weird part. This is the weird part right here. This right here, what is it? What is the desire? What is the desire? What is the emotional frequency of the wish that you have? Well, I analyze myself, and this is actually comes from desire. You know, I want to make more money. I want to get more views. I want to do these things. When you look at the emotional frequency chart, desire is actually in the yellow, right? It's actually a low vibrational energy. So when you, and because of that, because it's a low vibrational energy, emotion, this is not enough to sustain someone practically to reach, to constantly break the threshold of resistance that's holding them back from the thing that they desire in the first place. This is something that I've understood. Because you do these things out of desire, which in and of itself is a negative emotional frequency, you are not going to push past the resistance to get the thing you desire in the first place. And then you ask yourself, okay, why do you desire these things? Well, it's because you're lazy and you want things easy, right? People are lazy. This is just the truth. This is just the truth. People, we are lazy and we want things to be easy. This is why AI is so popular. So with this being said, because this is a low desire, because this is a low vibrational energy, what happens? Well, eventually you basically fall to resistance and you get closer to your hell. I'm getting closer to my hell through these desires. Now, I'm not saying money's bad. Money's not bad. It's simply just a tool to get what we want in the system that we have, that we developed, okay? And I still do want money and I still do have desires. But there has to be something higher than that. And so intuitively, I understand that enlightenment is the thing, is the highest desire. It's not the highest desire, but it's the highest emotional frequency that you could possibly have as a human being. Enlightenment, second to love, I believe is the highest sort of emotional frequency that you can emulate to get closer to God and get closer to your ideal, right? And we all know, even through stories in the Bible, why God is so important. Because God has always been the source of blessings, both spiritually and monetarily. Does that make sense? Because of the old covenant, the Jewish people find themselves in high monetary standing, right? Because of the old covenant. Every sort of shepherd, king, and prince being blessed by God was able to essentially have their cups overflow with. Does that make sense? Either way, doesn't even matter if it's about money or not. Being closer to God, being closer and higher on your emotional vibration ultimately leads to positivity, right? And I honestly have yet to experience this positivity. I've experienced it in minor ways in which I'm enlightened by information and I share with my friends, and it overall boosts the quality of my experience of life, right? It boosts the quality of my experience of life. With that being said, how does this work? Well, it's by abandoning the desire and doing it for enlightenment. So with this being said, I can give you two analogies. One with weightlifting. As you can see, I'm actually in very good shape. But I weightlift not because I have a desire to have a good body and have a good physique, but it's because I have joy and love, and I feel enlightened by weightlifting. I feel enlightened and I feel love through lifting weights. I do this for the love of the game. I've been lifting for 11 years. Love of the game type shit. It's the same thing, right? When it comes down to women, most guys who really suck with women, and this is something that we're going to talk about on this channel, the reason you suck with women is because you are too busy focused on having sex with her. You have a desire, not because you get joy out of courting women, not because you get joy out of the interaction. You don't feel joy in the interaction. You feel anxiety and fear and shame, and you are just living based off a desire, which is a low emotional vibration, and then you don't get her anyway. It's really weird how that happens. So what's the goal? The goal obviously is to switch your aim and do it for enlightenment's sake, rather than just doing things for more money and more views, rather than just doing things for the desire that you have. Now, I wanted to ask myself, okay, why is God like this? Right? Why is God like this? And this is my theory. When you look below here, maybe I can lower the camera here. I made a deduction, right? And when you look at like how energy moves in sine waves, right? And the thing that I thought about was in dopamine, you have A and B processes, right? And how A and B processes work, when you spike your dopamine, your dopamine threshold goes down, right? And when you drop your dopamine manually by doing delayed gratification activities, your happiness goes up, right? Your dopamine, your baseline actually rises. And I thought, okay, like, why did God do that? Like, why in the world is it like this? And to that, I can only theorize that that's just the order of the universe, because that's just how energy moves. Energy works in equilibrium. I believe the will of God and the will of the universe is to keep everything in equilibrium. So if I'm a low pressure molecule, if I'm a high pressure molecule, I'm going to move to low pressure, right? And eventually the low pressure molecule space is going to have a higher pressure, and then it's going to move back to low pressure in the opposite space. So what does this mean? What goes up must come down, and what goes down naturally goes up because of equilibrium, right? Because that's just how energy moves. It's the same thing with your hormones. And I do believe that it's the same thing psychically, right? I do believe it's the same thing with psychic energy. I do believe that psychic energy is actual energy, just like electricity, just like with magnetism, just like with pretty much every other unseen molecule that we've managed to harness through the grace of God and science, which is really just, I honestly believe science is just what God allows us to, it's just secrets of the universe that God allows us to discover. And we see this, right? And we have this. I believe, okay, this is how thoughts work, right? And so when you think about it, right, when everything you do, I believe, goes to the universe. Everything you do, I believe, goes to the universe. And whenever you have a low vibrational desire, you have a desire to basically get, right? You have a hole in yourself that you're trying to fill with something. So because of that, this desire for you to receive, you basically echo that out into the universe. Well, when you look at the emotional frequency chart, desire in and of itself is a low emotional vibration. So that low emotional vibration basically gets spat out into the universe. And because it's a low vibrational, emotion and state of being, it naturally sinks back down into the earth and goes closer to hell, basically. I think the exact opposite thing happens. The exact opposite thing happens when you're just chasing enlightenment. Because you're chasing enlightenment, you're already full. There's really nothing that you really wish to receive. There's nothing that you really wish to receive. And because of this, you sow that sort of energy downward into the earth, and then naturally it goes upwards towards the universe, and the universe reciprocates. Does that make sense? And it's the same thing with dopamine. And I don't want to erase this, but I'm gonna erase it anyway. I'm gonna erase it anyway because I want you to understand this, right? Okay, how am I gonna draw this, right? So I'm gonna draw basically like a graph of like how dopamine works. Dopamine, when it starts off, like, you have a certain baseline, okay? So this is like your baseline. You do instant gratification activity, and because of that, it drops back down and it goes back down below baseline, almost like a splash in a pool. It's the same thing with sowing desires into the world, right? You're purposefully, through your own will, through your own desire, through your own psychic energy, you are pushing your will upward into the universe. You have dreams to aim big, but because of that, the universe naturally pushes it back down, because that's just how equilibrium works, right? And it's the same thing with the A and B processes of dopamine. An A process is basically you giving yourself stimulus, and the B process is just the natural consequence of that stimulus. So let's say you have a low baseline dopamine. Well, any self-improvement influencer or any doctor would tell you, well, if you have a low dopamine, you need to work on de-stimulating yourself. So you almost kind of push yourself back down by taking a cold shower, going on no-fap, eating healthy food, doing things like that. Because of that, your dopamine, and because of the order of the universe, naturally wants to push it back up to compensate for the drop. And then your baseline dopamine actually ends up higher than when it started. And this is the A process, and this is the B process, all right? And I believe that it's the exact same way how energy, and it's the exact same way with how psychic energy works. I believe that your mind and your consciousness, because again, right, we are inside of God and God is inside of us. I believe it's almost like an alternating current circuit in electricity, right? And alternating current circuits are connected to their source, and they're also connected to the load. And electricity flows in both directions through multiple loads, right? And through multiple voltage sources. Like an antenna. An antenna, your mind is like an antenna, right? And it sends out those currents into the universe. And that universe basically interprets those currents, but those currents, what is your consciousness? Your consciousness is simply just memories and emotions. Those currents are embedded with the memories and emotions of the mind, right? And it interprets those currents, and then it balances them out. It reciprocates in that exact same way. So with that being said, if you're out there putting out an antenna, right, an emotional frequency of 125, which is desire on the emotional frequency chart, how is it going to balance that out? Well, it's simply just going, you're doing this. The reason you're basically giving out your desires is simply because you're trying to almost like, you're trying to manually like raise your emotion. You're trying to make yourself feel good. Basically, it's like you're trying to give yourself more dopamine. Naturally, what happens is that the universe reciprocates. The universe reciprocates, and then it goes back down. You don't get any of your desires met. You starve, right? You starve. But if you sow out positive frequencies, like enlightenment, right? If you're enlightened, this is just my theory. This is just me theorizing. The universe is going to interpret that and give you what you deserve. Because you're enlightened, it's going to reciprocate that, right? Enlightenment is you not needing anything. It's the equivalent of you simply allowing yourself to be, right? Of you basically doing the healthy thing and not having as much dopamine. And the universe is just going to reciprocate that. And this is just my theory. This is just my theory on how it is that the world works and how the universe works, as far as resistance and actually receiving good fortune goes, right? And you can pretty much see this. I feel like most YouTubers, their businesses are fucking failing, right? I feel like their businesses are failing because they don't actually want to help people. They're not actually doing this out of enlightenment. At least I think most of them are they're doing this because they want something, right? They're doing this because they want something. I'm doing it because I want something. But I think a great way to go about operating in life is to actually seek enlightenment. When you're trying to lift weights, do it out of seeking enlightenment, right? And if you have, and of course, God, the muse, the universe, whatever you want to call it, they're going to know if you're faking it. If you don't actually, or if you're not actually doing it for enlightenment, you're simply not going to get it. But this is something that I'm realizing, is that enlightenment is what makes life fun anyway. Okay? If you're doing something every day that enlightens you, that's a lot more fun than doing something simply to appease your desires. It's like working a job you hate, that you have to work 80 hours a week for because you make 300K a year salary. People like that actually end up killing themselves, right? There's a joke, there's like other tribes in the world, they joke about America and they say, isn't this the place where people kill themselves, right? Some tribes, they don't even know what suicide even is. So with that being said, I really hope that this makes sense. This is gonna be the first theoretical video that I post on my channel. I wanna start doing more videos like this. So if you like this and if you watch it all the way through, I really appreciate it. This is just me talking, and I really hope you learn something. You should check out the emotional frequency chart if you're going through a rough time. Look at the emotional frequency chart and assess your desires and your goal and see where it's coming from, and then operate from there. All right, goodbye.